embarrassed to admit this in his work. Well, what if it is possible that human consciousness, sort of intensified through ritual and ceremony, has the capacity to influence elemental conditions and change weather patterns? Well, think about the situation we have on the planet now. We have this, super climate crisis. And we've had Hurricane Ike in the Midwest, devastated by floods. Droughts all around the planet. Massive droughts in Australia. What if what we've done in a way is unconsciously forced ourselves into a position where we're going to be required to reaccess these latent psychic capacities of the human mind for the purpose of global transformation? I think it's possible. So really the way I look at the situation we're in now is that we could see it as a kind of initiatory crisis for the human species as a whole. And basically every traditional indigenous culture around the world had initiation rituals. So that to go from a boy to a man or a girl to a woman, you had to pass through certain stages. And especially for men, those stages involved for women also, but especially for men, gaining, the ability, the capacity to make use of non-ordinary states of awareness, to go into other forms of consciousness, and to bring back, information from those other realms. So our society forfeited that capacity. And in a way, we shifted from kind of an initiation model that even the ancient Greeks had with the mysteries of Eleusis and so on, to an indoctrination model, where the idea was just to, put people into a suggestive trance state and then indoctrinate them into a belief system, whether it's, religion, or just, being habituated to violence through, Grand Theft Auto or something, or television, which puts people into a kind of trance state. So I think in a way, we lost our initiatory traditions, and we became a culture based on practices of indoctrination. And the thing about initiation is you can't escape it. It's basic to the human person that there has to be some kind of initiatory process. So when we made it into something suppressed from conscious awareness and participation, it's become something that has grown as an unconscious need in the collective. And when that happens, because we don't have it consciously as a practice that brings the individual to, and the community to a different state of awareness, it's going to be inflicted potentially upon us unconsciously as a whole. So I would say that, what we could see with this economic crisis, the potential for real bankruptcy in this country, the climate crisis, the military crisis, we're bringing on a initiatory stage that's going to force us into transformation, or we're not going to make it as a species, I think. We're not very well anyway. We might have a nice road warrior ending where everybody's fighting for oil in the desert or something, but I don't think it's going to be much fun. So we're in this kind of initiatory crisis. And if we look back to the 1960s, I think you could see that the 60s were a kind of first stage in a kind of initiatory process for the modern Western psyche. And, at that point, the psychedelics came back in, Eastern mysticism came back in. There was, this huge assertion of this shamanic and psychic and mystical consciousness into the Western psyche, along with a kind of social and political awareness and social activism, which we haven't really seen since. And but it was too much for the modern Western psyche at that point, because we didn't have any traditions. We didn't have elders. We didn't have wisdom keepers. We didn't have shamans. So even, we had people like Timothy Leary, who'd been an alcoholic, professor until 61 or something, and then had his first LSD trip and, became, Mr. Shaman. So there was no depth in terms of our cultural background for making use of this material. And so people would go out there and they would get lost, they would fall apart. Even somebody like John Lennon, people who were really elevated to a state of being kind of psychedelic psychopomps, for the whole culture. They weren't ready for this experience. So John Lennon later admitted in an interview that, he took LSD and then he destroyed his own ego, and it took him years to kind of piece it back together again. So that was, I think, a first stage in a initiatory process for the modern Western psyche. And then it was too much, and that kind of inspiration, that energy, had to go underground, kind of like mycelial networks, which the spores kind of moving underground. And then over the generations since, and it's been like however many years, 40 years or something, a lot of people from the West went to shamanic cultures, went deeper into mystical traditions, and hopefully we've now prepared the ground for there to be a second stage in that initiatory process, and really a bringing back of that knowledge into the mainstream society. And I would say I even see a gathering such as this, which was unprecedented. 5 years ago, you couldn't have had a gathering like this. It's not possible. When I published, Breaking Open the Head, there was still this, repression around the whole subject of psychedelics. And I think it's a sign of, what's happening, culturally, perhaps even astrologically, that we're able to, come together now in New York City and think rationally and not feel persecuted for having this discussion and this debate. That this initiatory process is continuing in our time. Joseph Campbell talked about this kind of, the archetype of shamanism as being a process of separation, initiation, and return. So the candidates kind of separate from their culture, go through this like brutalizing initiatory process where they gain access to non-ordinary states and learn how to use them in their own lives and so on. Then they have to bring back that knowledge. They bring back that knowledge into their community, so that the community can go forward. The shaman is supposed to be the guide and the visionary who creates a forward path for their tribe. So I think that we had this separation, we've had this initiation, and now this is really the time for that return. And this culture now is really going to need people who have accessed some kind of visionary insights and some kind of understanding of the psyche that goes beyond what our culture has allowed people to know. Let's see. Well, that's about it. Yeah, so for me personally, I think it's what's happening right now with this psychedelic research and the allowance of this to take place is so incredibly important, and it's really awesome that so many of you are coming here. This is like a much, I think, bigger audience already than I saw here last year, just to soak in this material so that you can go back to your friends and your community and say that, for instance, the MDMA studies for post-traumatic stress disorder, and we have like tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Iraqi soldiers coming back with PTSD. I think that there's no doubt in my mind that MDMA could be a very potent therapy tool for these poor people. So it's very powerful information, and using it properly and distributing it wisely, it could be a great help in this next period. And frankly, I think a lot of people on Wall Street and in our world are going to be experiencing different forms of PTSD because. They're plugging huge holes in the financial system right now, but they're almost out of shovels. And we can see that they've been plugging in more and more fictitious capital to kind of keep the illusion of the system going, and they're going to run out of that capacity in a short period of time. So then we're going to be in a different stage. Okay, cool. So for me, it's like. That just I guess my postscript in a way. Like I've really been thinking about what do we do in this period that we're heading into, and for me it's partially like how do we really activate local communities and local networks almost as like shock absorbers for what may happen to our American system. And most people are totally in a dream bubble. They haven't really been able to deal with even the concept of what they've seen as their future may not go forward in the way that they think it's going to go forward. So I think that people like us here who are beginning to maybe assimilate different ideas of different possibilities, may have to step forward in the next few years as kind of leaders in our various communities and, try to help people through this transition, and psychedelics, are tools for that. I don't think we should, confuse anymore, that psychedelics are answers or whatever, but they're potent tools for giving people a different understanding of the world and different possible, ways of approaching reality.